Ahoy, I'm Old Man Boone, and today we're going to experiment by editing in 3 different programs. We'll start with something I already edited in Premiere, then we'll edit in Vegas Pro, and finally we're going to try out Shotcut, which is freeware. Now this is going to be video editing only. We're just going to use the audio I already have for this, because I don't want this video to get too crazy. Alright, I've got my house slippers on. Let's get started.
Oh, we're burning down the midnight oil. I don't know what it's for anyway. Hey, 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 hey.
First things first, we're going to open Premiere and select something to cut. We're going to use a brief scene from my short film, The Importance of Sugar in Your Food. I'll link it below in the description. Check it out if you get a chance, it really helps me out. Once I've got my scene, we're going to export and snag the audio from it. Since you won't get to see me do any editing in Premiere, I'll summarize for you in one sentence its main downside. It's expensive and subscription-based. All that's left is to grab my clips and open Vegas Pro. I open the application and I'm greeted by a very gray program. I go to make a new project and pick a footage template. If you're uncertain on your footage specs, you can check your aspect ratio and frame rate by right-clicking the footage and clicking Properties. I began importing clips into Vegas Pro. It's a little unusual. The look is a little archaic, but that's okay. I was a little thrown off by the layouts and that you can place audio tracks above video tracks on the timeline. It seemed a little unusual to me. I ran into my first major issue when I began adding one of my VHS filters. Now, the clip you see on the timeline right now is old surveillance footage. The only thing I'm after from this footage is the screen tearing that's happening at the bottom of the clip. So all I really want to do is just crop the footage and place it on the bottom of the frame. It was one of the first things I tried, and like a stubborn fool, I didn't want to look it up. Don't worry, I changed that mindset pretty quickly. I left this footage sped up, but intact, to show you how much I struggled to figure out this basic step. More on me than the program, but cropping footage shouldn't be this complicated. In case you were wanting to do the math on how dumb I am, this footage is sped up to 2200%. Moving on, not exactly certain why I thought I should implement the VHS filters first before I had the clips cut or arranged, but sizing the static to fit the frame was much easier after having dealt with the tearing effect from earlier. Word of advice, don't do effects first, even if you know where you're going, because especially when you're dealing with high-res footage, this can make fine cutting a nightmare. I then make a copy of the static, as one is going to be an overlay while the other is a visual transition. If that doesn't make sense, it will a little later. This next step is very important. While looking up keyboard shortcuts in Vegas Pro, you're going to want to get distracted by that DVD you had been looking at on eBay earlier. But you don't need to buy it. I repeat, do not buy it. Buying it would be a mistake. Otherwise, you'll have to make a video later talking about it just to justify the purchase. I ended up having to look up how to do just about anything in Vegas Pro. How to implement effects, how to separate audio and video tracks, how to cut video, how to put an opacity overlay effect on the video as some of the static was intended as a visual overlay. Just about anything that I was trying to do in this program, I had to look up. I couldn't figure out if there was an RGB splitter effect to create that slight tape tracking issue, but by the time I got to color grading, I was just glad I was making progress. But just when I thought I was about done, I ran into the biggest issue so far. There is a key moment here in the film when all the VHS effects disappear, the soundscape normalizes, and the footage looks clean and calm. It's supposed to be a reflective moment. It's very important to the narrative, but any color correction I did to one clip affected every clip from that source video file. I tried to look up solutions to this problem, and considered even creating a copy of the source file and renaming it, but that didn't feel practical. When you're working with large clips, you want to avoid using up extra disk space, so I left it as is. I had already spent 3 hours figuring out this program, and I figured it was time to move on. I exported my clip and proceeded to open up Shotcut. We open up Shotcut, and it's already a relief to see black instead of that late 90s gray. I run into a few goofs trying to resize the timeline and add tracks, but nothing major. Before I realize it, we've already got our clips imported and we're moving on to visual effects. I was really surprised to see how easy it was to do anything in Shotcut. For freeware, I was hoping for the best, but honestly was expecting it to be limited. I found myself navigating it incredibly quickly. It was around here that I had a bit of a scare. I realized I hadn't saved yet. That's when the program crashed. I opened it back up, but thankfully it had created an autosave and I hadn't lost any of my progress. From there, we start moving on to visual effects and color grading, and I start creating that VHS tape look. It has really solid color tools. I end up playing around with some of the visual effects, but end up settling on their Technicolor preset with some slight tweaks. That's when I found it. Shotcut has an RGB shift tool built into it. It was a relief to see after my issues earlier. I ended up stumbling onto it by accident just by playing around with the visual effects. I realized as well that I could copy and paste effects from one clip to the other straight from the filters panel, and when all was said and done, I had finished in roughly 25 minutes. Now let's check out all 3 versions. I'll let you decide which your favorite is. I'd say at the end of the day that all 3 programs produce similar results. The main limitation ended up being my familiarity with the programs and how quickly I was able to make changes to the final product. All 3 of these programs can do the job, but let's compare how they performed, keeping in mind my limited knowledge of Vegas and Shotcut. I'm a bit biased because I spent most of my time working in Premiere, but I'm also familiar with its ins and outs, but it has plenty of good and bad qualities as an application. Vegas Pro is a bit of a nightmare to work in, if I'm being honest. I definitely wouldn't recommend it for beginners and would advise even seasoned editors to take a couple days familiarizing themselves with it before they take on any client work. Shotcut was honestly the most fun of the 3 to edit in. Everything was easy to find and it was fast to use. I'm curious how its audio tools compare, but it really ended up being a powerhouse for such a small and free program. I've made this video somewhat with the intention to showcase that it really doesn't matter what you edit in, especially when you're weighing your equipment costs. Manual focus lenses, 1080p cameras, and freeware such as Shotcut can be your best friends in cutting costs without sacrificing your vision. I put a link in the description for all 3 of these programs if you want to try them out for yourself. That'll be it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.